Few leaders have faced the situation in their career as severe and consequential as the COVID-19 pandemic and its resulting global economic impact. Leaders who often rely on pattern recognition and past experience are finding that today's challenges have no historical comparison. This period has become a true test of their leadership ability. We at Russell Reynolds have reached out to some of the world's most notable CEOs and chairmen to better understand what it will take for leaders to be successful in a post-COVID landscape. My name is Jens-Thomas Pietralla, and today I'm joined by Marc Bitzer, Chairman and CEO of Michigan-headquartered household appliances giant Whirlpool. Marc, the world experienced more volatility in global trade even prior to the arrival of the coronavirus. At Whirlpool today, how do you plan, develop, validate, and update scenarios for the short and for the long term?
So let me maybe start off with differentiating a little bit more of the short versus the long term. The short term, what this pandemic has shown us is that the time frame which you have for decisions has just gotten extremely short. I remember at times the visibility you had on time horizon was days or weeks or sometimes hours. So you have to decide not with 2080, you have to decide sometimes with 298. Extremely limited information base. And what you then need in this situation is basically, you need to have a certain ability to recognize patterns. You got to able to think around corners. And frankly, also experience helps, because some of that you can relate to certain things. But the reality is you have to decide fast, and that also comes very often with leadership confidence, because you don't have a time to analyze everything ad infinitum. On the long term, I think this crisis more than ever has shown, this is pretty much the end of a traditional strategic planning as we know. There is no sequential planning, there is no one plan. This is all about scenarios and our ability to develop options which deal with the respective scenarios, and also actively working on keeping these options alive, which sometimes is also costly. But the big learning going forward, there is no one strategic plan. There's maybe a base plan, but several strategic options which every company has to nurture.
Much has been said about the need for authentic leadership, especially the CEO's ability to connect with all stakeholders in an honest dialogue. What have been your most challenging COVID-19 conversations, Marc?
I think, first of all, what this crisis has shown is, most people can steer a ship when it's sunny and calm outside and the winds are low. When the winds are high and the waves are high, it's a different story. And as a leader, a crisis humbles you. It reminds you also of a basic property of being a servant leader, which, is humbling, but also energizing, because it's energizing to be able to lead an organization through troubled times. Particularly when it comes to communication, what I rediscovered is just the extreme value of straight talk. Straight talk starts with a person in front of a mirror, yourself. If you don't face reality, who else will? So, particularly around March, this was a sobering awakening, which you first have to realize yourself. But then the other thing, and that may be the nice thing about remote working, as a CEO, all of a sudden you have the ability to talk to everybody at the same time. It's not anymore layers and communication departments. You talk at times to 10,000 people. And what you learn is, an organization can digest reality. There is no need for sugarcoating, because people can deal with bad news. There is no need to be the drama queen either, but straight talk helps. The last thing I want to say about communication, what has really turned out critical, is the ability to own the narrative. Right now things happen so fast. If you let social media define the story, then you're already lost. So it's so critical to own the narrative, give a narrative to the organization before you get all the echo from a different social media.
With the unprecedented crisis, there are not many blueprints CEOs can turn to. Hence, having sparring partners to weigh the options must be important. How are you working with your fellow board members and other advisors on managing this crisis and arriving at the best outcome for the business?
In short, very differently than usually. Let me explain it. First of all, particularly at the outset of a crisis, it is critical that you hold the reins. You don't have a time to make a decision, and somebody has to make the decision. And in this case, the CEO has to make the decision. it is what it is. You can't wait for all the consensus being aligned and everybody weighing in on opinion. It is different, and you have to make the decision as a leader. There comes also a point where you got to let go again and you got to re-empower the organization, which is a tricky balance. But I think that is most critical in the current environment. Now, in particular, when it comes to talking with what I call the executive committee or management board in Europe, it's been different. We had twice a week at a minimum video conferences with our entire management board. I have pretty much a daily video call with all my global leaders or executive committee members. And I think in the crisis, you lean as a CEO in particular towards the CFO and CHRO. Maybe the CHRO more than ever before, because this has not only been a financial and business crisis, it's also been a human crisis. I mean, safety, health, the concerns, everything weighing on people is so crucial. So CHRO was front and center as a sparring partner in the current environment.
Do you believe that the COVID-19 experience will have lasting effects on how boards look at their CEOs and candidates for succession? In other words, which leadership competencies will be considered more important in the future than they have been in the past?
I would say not only CEOs. The reality is this pandemic turned out to be the ultimate talent test. There's never been a more rigorous talent assessment than the crisis. It's not only a test of skills, it's also a test of character. And I think we've been surprised, how highly rated leaders disappointed. But we've also been surprised how people whom we didn't have super high in our rankings rose to the occasion and just turned out they took the lead and they led. So I think this crisis also taught us a little bit, there's not only one way to look at talent, and some people really rose to the occasion. I think the skills and the character which we saw really as winning characters are elements like resilience, perseverance, and a leadership style which I call incredible calm, but yet incredible intense. And that is almost an oxymoron, which only very few people can succeed with, because you have to stay calm, because if you panic, the entire organization will panic. But you also got to be incredible intense, because it's not a situation where you just lean back and let it go. So again, I think we look probably at different characters, particularly around resilience and just perseverance. But it needs to also be coupled with one critical element, which was so important in the last months, actually, is empathy. Because, it's not just an economic crisis, it's also a human crisis. People have fears. People are worried about their own lives, their family. And to deal with economic pressure and the human pressure and the fears, that requires a very empathetic leadership, which is more than the traditional definition of EQ.
Marc, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us today. All the best to you and to your team at Whirlpool.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.